Good morning. I'm Wendy Sucure. I think most of you I know, but I wanted to take this opportunity to welcome you all and to mention that this portion of the program will be live streamed. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, and the Haudenosaunee people, and the Anishinaabe as well as the Wendat peoples. And it's important for us, especially at this university, who as part of our commitment to truth and reconciliation changed its name, to always acknowledge that we work on the land of Indigenous peoples. I also want to thank many of our partners for joining us here today, from government, from the private sector, and of course from our powerful ecosystems. I was going to speak a little bit about the work of the Diversity Institute, but you can read about it. And I don't want to take time away other than to say that we have 130 full-time staff now working on a variety of projects focused on creating economic pathways for Indigenous and peoples and equity-deserving groups, and of course the work we do to advance small businesses as well as entrepreneurship is really core, and we have lots and lots of folks in the room, both within the Diversity Institute and outside, that have been helping drive that agenda forward. So what I would like to do is curtail my remarks and welcome our newest dean, Cynthia Holmes, who has been at the Ted Rogers School of Management for a number of years and has been an incredible supporter of the work that we do. She has lots of secrets. I won't tell you all of them, but she brings to bear a diverse background and experience working with industry, particularly in the real estate sector, and she has brought a new vision to the school, and also experience skydiving, which is very, very useful. The Ted Rogers School has a strong commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion in everything that it does. And as the largest business school in the country, that's very important in terms of shaping the ecosystem. So over to you, Dean Holmes.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Minister Valdez, welcome. Distinguished friends and colleagues, good morning. Thank you all so much for attending today. It's lovely to have you here. My name is Cynthia Holmes. Yes, I'm the new Dean of the Ted Rogers School of Management, appointed in June of this year. So to those of you who are joining us from outside the Ted Rogers community, I hope you enjoyed on your way in the buzz of the second week of classes. I have 13,000 students who are here enjoying their business education. We're the largest undergraduate business school in Canada, and also the best, right? What do we do here at TRSM? So we are operating in excellence, and put simply, we're developing the next generation of innovators, leaders, and entrepreneurs. So under the mentorship of the incredible faculty members that we have, who are deeply connected to industry, over 90% of them have deep industry connections. We are trying to shape a business school with energy, with compassion, and to create a school where we are pursuing the vision of creating a better place for all of us, a better community. So my students are an inspiration to all of us, and I'm very glad to be here. I do want to share some breaking newsflash, new events that we're having here in the entrepreneurship sphere of the business school. So this fall, 1,000 of my students are taking a brand new course in entrepreneurship, Entrepreneurship 101. It's a required course. So we're one of the few, if perhaps only, business schools that on the very first day of class, welcome, you're going to be learning about entrepreneurship. The class is called Building an Entrepreneurial Mindset. So I'm very excited about what this might spark in my students. So 1,000 this semester and 1,000 next semester are taking this class to sort of think about what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? How do you contemplate it? How do you get started? So it could spark some really exciting things. So I'm just delighted by that. At our business school, besides the students and the classes, we are happy to be the home to 15 research centers, institutes, and labs that provide cutting-edge academic and social community programming. So one of these centers is the Diversity Institute, the biggest and the best, right, Wendy? So this Diversity Institute is a treasure to the Ted Rogers School of Management, absolute treasure. And under Wendy's leadership, the Diversity Institute explores questions about how diversity is our cornerstone Canadian value and a key source of our competitive advantage. The Ted Rogers School is a hub of excellence, and the Diversity Institute embodies this and takes it on time after time with every project that they do. So to Wendy and everyone in the Diversity Institute, I want to really congratulate you on this event. This is wonderful. I'm absolutely excited to be attending. Your work and your leadership is a real source of pride to me, to the business school, and to the university as a whole. So to all of you, please enjoy your time here at the Ted Rogers School. I hope that the sessions you attend and the networking opportunities are very fruitful and they inspire and enlighten you. And please remember, as Ted Rogers liked to say, the best is yet to come. Congratulations and welcome, everyone.
I wanted to, of course, introduce our guest of honor, Rechie Valdez, the Minister of Small Business. But before I do that, I did want to just say a couple of things generally about the work of the Diversity Institute and how it has been really accelerated because of the commitments made by the Government of Canada in recent years to taking a whole of government approach to advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion, not just in entrepreneurship, but right across the government. And I really think, particularly given some of the things that are happening south of the border and even within our own borders, it's really important to recognize how important the government's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, to truth and reconciliation, to ensuring that barriers and systemic discrimination are identified, are spoken about, are named. You know, one of the first governments to talk about anti-Black racism as a thing that we all had to work on. I think it's super important to provide that context because for the work that we do, it's critically important to recognize how important not just the funding is from the government, but the policy frameworks and the commitments. If you look at things, for example, the Privy Council has sent out to all departments in terms of commitments around equity, diversity, and inclusion, it's transformational. If you look at things like the Black Entrepreneurship Strategy Program, the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy Program, the Canadian Digital Adoption Program, I can name more and more and more programs that from our perspective are evidence-based and really driving significant change in a very difficult time. And one of the things that we found during COVID, which I've never really seen in my life before, was how quickly government, and I mean not just politicians, but civil servants as well, adapted to change. And this meant that when the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub came forward and said that program isn't serving the needs of women. That program doesn't respond to the fact that Indigenous businesses tend not to be incorporated. That program doesn't recognize that Black entrepreneurs are being harder hit by COVID and have no capacity to take on further debt. Government pivoted and changed the terms of those programs in real time and moved faster than anything I've ever seen before. And I think it's important to really recognize that because there's an enormous opportunity to hang on to that capacity for innovation and responsiveness. So, with that, I would like now to introduce our guest of honor. And Minister Valdez, there was an article in the Globe recently on her that said from banker to baker, has such an interesting background that I think is invaluable in her new portfolio. She has experience in the financial sector, and she has experience on the other side of banks in developing and running her own business. When she was elected to government, she stepped up on a number of different portfolios. She represents Mississauga-Streetsville, and she served on the Standing Committee for Veterans Affairs, the Canadian NATO Parliamentary Association, and she is also chair of the Canada-Philippines Parliamentary Friendship Group. So she's moved beyond her role as representing Mississauga-Streetsville to take on lots of other important roles. And we know her from her pivotal role in being the parliamentarian who introduced the piece of legislation to proclaim International Women's Entrepreneurship Day. And we hope she'll be joining us in celebrating at the Stock Exchange in November. I could say more and more, but I think she will share with you some of her insights and background in her remarks. And we were hoping to keep her for an extended period. She has to leave at 12:30 sharp, so we're going to try to keep the formal program tight, so that those of you who want a chance for your selfies will have time to have your photograph taken with the minister at 12:15. Minister Valdez also has the experience of having immigrated to Canada, which I think has shaped her commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. She has not just run her own business, but she has played an important role in the media, so that she, in addition to starting her bakery, also started a number of podcasts and engaged with. She was the host of a television show where she shared the stories of entrepreneurs, and we all know that the storytelling piece is so critically important. So with that, please join me in welcoming Minister Valdez.
Good morning, everybody. I said good morning. It's a beautiful day. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Amazing. Good morning to everyone in person and virtually to those online. I know you're not with us here, but you're definitely with us in spirit. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm truly excited to join you all this morning. Thank you, Wendy, for that wonderful and kind introduction. Thank you also for acknowledging the Indigenous territories we're gathered on. I join you all with respect for this land, for the First Nations people who have resided and now reside here. I would like to extend a big thank you to our host here at the Diversity Institute, including Wendy, the Institute's and Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub's founder and academic director. It's so great to meet you here in person, Wendy. We've already spoken over the phone. I'm looking forward to hearing Nadine Spencer, President and CEO of the Black Business and Professional Association, one of our terrific Black Entrepreneurship Program ecosystem partners, and Tabitha Bull, President and CEO of the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, share their experience on innovative and inclusive entrepreneurship with us today. I would like to also acknowledge Vicki Saunders, who I had the opportunity, who I spoke with in my first couple weeks in the role. Vicki is the founder and CEO of Corrales and one of the incredible organizations delivering our government's Women Entrepreneurship Loan Fund. As a new Minister of Small Business and as an entrepreneur myself, I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you and really to be around the energy of the university as well. It's truly wonderful. And also to highlight the impact of the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub as they work hard to support diverse entrepreneurs across the country. But before I get started, I want all of you here as well as online to think back to that time when you were in elementary school. And I want you to think about what you wanted to be when you grew up. I want you in this moment to think for a second in your mind what those 2 to 3 ideas were and I want you to hold those things. And if you're like me who likes to take notes, you can feel free to jot it down. So when I think back to my own entrepreneurship journey, I remember the challenge I faced starting out, whether that was having the courage to overcome fear. I had the fear of both success and the fear of losing, which was totally hard. It was so difficult. My own self-doubt, to begin something new, to seek resources and people to help me, or figuring out how to fund my own business. Back then, there was virtually nothing to support me other than my family, and I found I had to do everything by myself. And so I did. I hustled. And so for those of you that don't know my story, Wendy was alluding to it. After 15 years of corporate banking, I discovered my creative passion when I baked my daughter's first birthday cake. Cassidy turned 1, and I was like, okay, like I can do this. I can make her birthday cake. Without realizing that when I did, I would discover something so magical, so perfect. And I'm like, yes, finally. Because when you're in a 9-to-5 corporate bubble, you're in that bubble. And I didn't see any way out until I baked that cake. And so that cake for me was the very catalyst that got me inspired to do more outside of that bubble and to do something for myself. And so that's really what started it. And so what is startling for me is knowing that everything that we're talking about today, for the most part, didn't even exist. But here's the good news. We're here today. Our government took a leadership role. We stepped up and we made a bold decision to introduce Canada's first ever women entrepreneurship strategy in 2018. This is now a nearly $7 billion investment that, together with our partner organization, and that includes some of you in this very room, are helping thousands upon thousands of women entrepreneurs access the financing, networks, mentorship, I didn't have that, and training they need to succeed. And Cynthia, I wish I knew about that 101 entrepreneurship course, kind of skipped that and had to figure it all by myself. The Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub is a key component of the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy, led by Toronto Metropolitan University right here, and supported by 10 regional hubs. This knowledge hub serves as one-stop source of knowledge, data, and best practices on women entrepreneurship in Canada. Again, these are the things I wish I had back then. It brings together researchers, business support organizations, and expert stakeholders to create a more equal and supportive environment for growing women entrepreneurship. Through the hub, service providers, academics, government, and industries can access tools to further enhance their support for women entrepreneurs. If I could hit the reset button now on my business today, I'm confident and encouraged knowing that I would be able to reach even greater heights than I did, with more opportunity, more support, more resources, but most importantly, I feel like I would be less hustling on an island by myself, but more so being part of a larger country with a resilient, interconnected, like-minded group of women. Other business support programs we have developed to build a more inclusive entrepreneurship ecosystem include the Black Entrepreneurship Program and the 2S LGBTQI Entrepreneurship Program. The Black Entrepreneurship Program, the first of its kind ever, is helping address the systemic barriers faced by Black entrepreneurs in accessing capital and business support services. The 2S LGBTQI Plus Entrepreneurship Program, also the first of its kind, is working with knowledge hubs and business ecosystems to help underrepresented entrepreneurs grow their businesses. We are also supporting Indigenous entrepreneurs to ensure First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation can fully share in and contribute in Canada's economic success. Dans l'ensemble, ces initiatives aident des milliers d'entrepreneurs sous-représentés à atteindre leurs objectifs commerciaux, qu'il s'agisse de démarrer, de croître ou de s'implanter sur de nouveaux marchés. Altogether, These initiatives are helping thousands of underrepresented entrepreneurs reach their business goals, whether they're starting up, scaling up, or expanding into new markets. And I think I was sworn in about 6 to 7 weeks ago. I've really had the opportunity to connect with those amazing entrepreneurs and hear their stories, and these supports are really helping them. Our government truly understands that diversity and inclusion are critical to creating a strong economy. This is exemplified through the deliberate steps we've taken with a whole-of-government approach, as Wendy mentioned, to advocate for women and marginalized groups. And I want to give a shout out to Minister Marcy Ian, as we are all in her riding today, and thank her for all the work she's done as the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth. We will continue to support programs that bring everyone, all your talents to the table for the benefit of all Canadians. Before I close, I want you to think back to the childhood aspirations that you had for yourself in elementary school. And with a show of hands, I want to know if on that list was entrepreneurship. Did you see that? It's a very select few. And I need to thank your parents right now. As you can see, it was a very small group. So my daughter Cassidy, who was 8 years old, this summer shared her dream with me. She said, "Mom, when I grow up, I want to either be a ballet teacher, a kung fu master, run a baking business just like you did, or become an MP." To all you incredible leaders in this room, to all of you who have joined today, it is my honor to be with all of you. Because I promise you all, you will forever change the choices that our children and our daughters will make for generations to come. So thank you everyone for being here today, for your time, and let us continue to work together to advocate for progress for change. We do not want to go backwards in time. We've come way too far. And let's focus on a positive future for Canada, and a big thank you again to the Diversity Institute for hosting us. Thank you all so much.
Everything's always choreographed and I mess it up, sorry. Again, I had some remarks, kind of the sales pitch for the Diversity Institute, but I think everybody else has covered off the stuff that we do. I just wanted to say thanks so much, Minister Valdez, for making the time to come. Given that you're new in the portfolio, it was really an honor for you to accept this invitation. And I have to say the same thing, especially to Tabitha, Nadine, Kyla, and Vicky. When we call, they come, and it really makes a difference because they're leaders in the ecosystem and making a difference every single day. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on introductions to the panelists. I'll give them each a moment to introduce themselves. But I do think it's really important to understand. Coincidentally, it is a panel of women. But we're not here just to talk about women's entrepreneurship. We're here to talk about Indigenous entrepreneurship. We're here to talk about the work related to the Black Entrepreneurship Program and the amazing work that the Black Business Professional Association does. And of course, although the Corrales, formerly CEO, does focus on women and women identifying entrepreneurs, the model that they have developed, and I am going to try to sneak in a pitch around crowdfunding and microloans and grants, but the model that Corrales has developed, both in terms of accessing resources that would not otherwise be available, it's one thing, but also thinking intentionally about the impact of entrepreneurship and small businesses in Canada beyond job creation and exports and innovation, and thinking about the alignment between what entrepreneurs and small businesses do in solving the world's to-do list and addressing the sustainable development goals, I think is really, really important to many people in the room. So with that, I would like, and of course, Kyla is a real live example of what we're all working to advance. So I think without more opening remarks, I'll just turn it over to the panel to briefly introduce themselves and a little bit about what their organization is doing and how they see the challenges ahead of us. And Vicki, I'll let you start because you're closest to me.
Okay. You're good there? You okay? No, I'm good. Okay. It's nice to have you up here. Hi, I'm Vicki Saunders and founder of Coralus. Coralus. Let's all say Coralus, not Corrales. Coralus. It's okay. It's a whole thing. It's kind of a joke that's going
And
on.
I'm
with
Wendy Sukier, not Wendy Kukier, just in case anyone wanted to know.
Sukier, there you go. Pronunciation matters. Anyway, Coralus. So we have, I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my whole life, and look at the way that we create supports for entrepreneurship and the way that we fund entrepreneurs. And I think that a lot of those approaches are not really working. As we look globally, about 2% of financing goes to women entrepreneurs. We've seen these numbers over and over. If you're a woman of color, it is so much worse. If you're an Indigenous woman, it's like not even a percentage point. So these things need to be redesigned. Like a lot of our systems and structures were designed for a different time and place, and we don't live there anymore. So we need to be rethinking things. And so a lot of the work that we do in our community is to step back and to unlearn the conditioning that we have so that we can create a world that looks different than the one that we're in. If we keep doing things the same way and designing, a women's version of the existing structures, it's not going to change anything. The world's still going to look the same. So we have this approach where we have women and non-binary folk in each country that we're operating in. We're in 5 countries right now. Contribute a small amount of money each month, $92. It's a gift. We're gifting our way to a new world. And then that money's pooled together, and then everybody goes online and votes for the kinds of entrepreneurs who we think are creating the kind of world we want to live in. Super simple. We started that in Canada. Thank you, Canada. It was the first place this model took off, with 500 women signing up to do this. We now have accumulated about $16.5 million, $92 at a time. It's been kind of painful and amazing at the same time, and it's exported to 5 different countries. And you'll hear from Kyla in a moment about this, but I want to just sort of underline how important it is for us to be using our imagination, our financial imagination, but every other part of our imagination to rethink things that aren't working and come up with new ways, because all of this was designed by humans, so we can change it. It's possible. So it's imagination time.
Thanks so much. And Tabitha, over to you. And I did want to say Tabitha leads the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Business, but she also was named CEO of the Year by the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. So her reach and scope and impact is massive. Over to you, Tabitha.
Thank you, miigwech. Oni Tabitha Indigenakas Nibisi Indigidaba Midjasido Dem. Thank you, Wendy and Minister, for acknowledging the land. So I've just said in my own language, Anishinaabe that my name is Tabitha. I'm a member of Nipissing First Nation. Really proud to be here. So I lead the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. We are a national not-for-profit membership association, kind of like a Chamber of Commerce or a business council. We are approaching our 40th anniversary, so have been around for quite some time. And our mandate is really to support the Indigenous economy and help us bring generational wealth back to Indigenous communities and entrepreneurs. And we do that by building bridges between corporate Canada and government and Indigenous entrepreneurs. There's a long history in our country of really excluding Indigenous entrepreneurs and excluding economies from being built within Indigenous communities, and we all have a role to play to ensure that we can help to rebuild those economies. So we do that through a number of different programs, both supporting corporate Canada and how they work with Indigenous communities and businesses, and also through supporting Indigenous businesses on, ensuring that policies and programming works to fit their needs, ensuring that there's ways that we can build mentorship opportunities for them, and also more recently, through COVID, really understanding what the needs were and the specific requirements of programming that was required for Indigenous businesses. And now that we're slowly moving out of that economy, how are we supporting to ensure that those businesses survive and continue to grow? So we've had some really incredible growth over the last 3 years. We have 2,100 members across Canada. About 1,600 of those are Indigenous businesses. We're still seeing phenomenal growth in Indigenous economies and businesses, and I think that's because we are a very resilient people, as we've proven. But it really takes a lot of our support and research to really understand what those unique needs are, so we can, as Vicky said, build the programs that are required and that meet specifically the needs of Indigenous business. And we do quite a bit of work with Wendy and the Diversity Institute on that research, supporting specific research. We will be coming out with a report in the fall that we've done with WEKH, so excited to put those learnings into actual practice and solutions. So, Chimigwech for having me.
Thank you so much. Nadine, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. Good morning, everyone. It's such a privilege to be here. And so, Dean, I love your song. Our song at the BBPA is Grow Old With Me, The Best Is Yet to Be. That's our song. And also Beyonce's, Who Runs the World. We know who does, right? We know who runs the world. Minister, also, I just want to thank you for your support. The Black Entrepreneurship Program is an incredible one because for the first time, we're seen and heard. So I'm Nadine Spencer, CEO at the Black Business and Professional Association. We are a 40-year-old organization that works to address equity and create economic opportunities for Black business owners and professionals in this country. And one of the things that we find the biggest challenge for us is systemic barriers, especially when it comes to money. So when we talk about generational wealth, if we're not even at the table at all, and we don't think we can be at the table, and there's no education or awareness for us, it's a challenge. I remembered during COVID, I went to one business owner in Little Jamaica, and they were saying that, nobody called them. My other colleagues in mainstream industries, the banks would call them, you should take the CEBA loan, you should do this, and no one called the Black entrepreneurs, nobody. They had no idea. They have no relationships with banks. They have no idea what financial literacy is. So when something happens, whether it's COVID or another issue meeting a supplier demand, they have no resources at all for the growth of their business. And so one of the things that we really work to do, especially on the generational wealth side, is to work with entrepreneurs that they have an understanding of financial literacy. They have an understanding of what access is. And we do that through our programs. We have 21 programs. One of our main programs with the Black Entrepreneurship Strategy is our BAIDS, which is the Business Advisor Implementation Development Services. And we came up with that program after conversations with Black entrepreneurs, having a wraparound where we literally sit with entrepreneurs one by one and we wrap around mentorship, sponsorship for them and their business, just so they can have the first understanding and a pathway to understanding what financial freedom is truly for a sustainable Black population that will have generational wealth. Because here's the thing, a lot of young Black youth are not hired at all because of systemic challenges. And who hires them? Black businesses. So we need Black businesses to succeed so they can be hired. So the work that we do, especially with the Diversity Institute, Wendy is an incredible partner because she truly walks the talk. She's a sponsor. She is a friend. She's a supporter in every single way, and that's what we need. We need people to say, you know what, have you asked a Black person to be at that table? Have you asked a Black entrepreneur? Have you created that opportunity? And so that's the work that we do. We forge partnerships with allies who will open the doors for us, and then we prepare our people, our entrepreneurs, our professionals, and our students so they can be ready for the opportunities that can be available to them, that is available for everybody else.
Thanks so much, and no pressure, Kyla, but as an example of a next-gen entrepreneur, Kyla is joining us today, and I did want to quickly read your bio and then please share your perspective. So she is the founder and CEO of WEKH Learning, which is an online platform offering specialized coding in STEM for K-12 students, equipping them with future-focused skills. And one of the reasons I was thrilled she was willing to join us is because not only is she young and an entrepreneur, but her business is driving at one of the core issues we need to be concerned about, which is upskilling, reskilling, and ensuring that youth are equipped for the jobs of the future. So do you want to say a few comments about your business and what you've learned?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So, yeah, exactly as she said, WEKH Learning, we deliver online coding and STEM programs to kids. And our real focus is making sure that kids are prepared for the future and making sure they actually have the skills needed to be successful in the job market. Now, even if your kids go to the best schools in the world, chances are they're not learning introduction to data science, understanding how to learn how to code, and all the skills that they're actually going to need for the workforce that they're entering into. And something that I've been really passionate about from a young age is making sure that access to adequate STEM skills is not another barrier and an inequality gap. So one of the ways I started my business is I was a senior at Tufts University, and I started a organization that helped get women and minorities jobs in corporate America. And what we saw is if you had tech skills, you were getting jobs a lot quicker. So that was one of the ways or one of the reasons why I started my company. And then about 8 years later, here we are, and we've been able to educate over 8,000 kids across the world from 30 different countries. And the way we do it is making sure that we have partnerships with youth-focused organizations and schools to actually implement these programs into schools, both private and public, so making sure that kids from all different backgrounds get coding and STEM skills, as well as having opportunities for families to be able to enroll their kids in their our courses. So I loved your story about how your child said that she might want to be a baker, just how you were. And it kind of reminded me about when I was in preschool, actually. I was asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this was at our preschool graduation. And I said, a boss. And I've definitely achieved that, but I really love the fact that Canada's focused on entrepreneurship, all of these amazing programs, but also adding like the intersectionality nature into what entrepreneurship means for many different types of people. And that's something that's really near and dear at our hearts at WEKH, and really what we're trying to promote.
Thanks so much. So with those introductions, I wanted to direct some general questions to the panel and then some specific questions. And I think, you know, we hear a lot about financing, we hear a lot about access to funding, and sometimes people immediately think loans, and of course Vicky's already talked about that, but we also need access to customers. We need access to procurement opportunities. And frankly, access to grants. So I wonder if maybe Nadine, you can talk a little bit about what some of the issues are in the Black community, and then Tabitha and Vicky, and what kinds of progress have been made in terms of access to financing and where the barriers remain.
Yeah, well, the progress we've made, which is great. So the Black Entrepreneurship Program has been quite phenomenal, like the first of its kind, but it really opened up the eyes to all of Canada of the challenges that Black entrepreneurs faced. Many individuals said to me, we just didn't know. We thought everybody could go into the bank and get a loan. Everybody would sort of have the knowledge. One of the things we've seen, so we run a program called Rise Up Pitch Competition. We had 1,700 Black women that applied for this program to get $10,000. 8 women were getting $10,000, and 1,700 applied. So you can see the challenge there. However, one of the women who did not place in the final, she called me up and she said, you know what, Nadine, I didn't win the money, but I got more than what the money would have given me. I understand for the first time what it is to run a business, what it is to formalize a business, what all the steps that I need, the business plan, the financial statement, understanding that, not just understanding that, but the language of how to speak that when they're working with corporate Canada or the financial institutions or partners to get funding. And she said, I also understand financial literacy. So 2 big wins from that. And so what we want to do is fill that gap over the long term to ensure that women entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs, and of course Tabitha, Indigenous entrepreneurs have those resources, those assets. And then I can't stress enough the importance of mentorship for our sector, because we need someone to guide us, to sort of talk through how important is network building and what does that really mean? And a good mentor, what do they do? What is the path to them guiding you through to where you need to go? So those are some of the things, Wendy, that we see. But I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful because of the supports that we have. I think conversations like this today is important. The awareness and the light shining on these topics is critical because it enables individuals who's looking on to say, you know what, I see that Kayla is having that challenge and I too can overcome that. And I think that is the biggest opportunity and the biggest win in environments like this.
Thanks so much. Tabitha, there have been big investments in Indigenous entrepreneurs in recent years, but there's still some gaps. Do you want to talk about the glass half full, the glass half empty?
I always try to talk glass half full, or I wouldn't get up in the morning. I think there is a real sense of optimism for sure. You know, even when we just think about how our membership has grown and the corporations who have come to the table wanting to support and help understand what their role can be to support Indigenous business. So, you know, a quick example, it was December, maybe October 2020, and Facebook, as they were called at the time, came forward and said, we want to help support Indigenous entrepreneurs. How can we do that? And they were wanting to develop a grant program, and basically said we have $500,000 that we want to be able to provide as grants to Indigenous entrepreneurs. Can you help us do that? And the really key thing that was so important there is they let us build the program as we thought it should be built. There was no conditions to how we were able to provide that grant funding, and the way we did that was to say, if you're an Indigenous entrepreneur, 51% owned and operated Indigenous business, that's the one criteria. The other criteria is that you apply. There was no need for them to prove that they needed the money, because I don't think any entrepreneur in December of 2020 should have had to prove that they needed money. It was only $2,500 as a grant, but then also we included for them to become a member of our association for a year to be able to provide that wraparound support, as you said. And we had a very similar, so at that time we let everybody know that we were going to be running this program, and it was going to be an intake, first come, first serve, to make it as fair as possible. We had 200 grants to be able to provide, and within 50 minutes we were had hit the limit and actually over the limit of our 200. So that a few things there were so important is that they really let us control how it should be built, that it was funding up front. It wasn't a reimbursement. So it wasn't that businesses had to apply and then they had to send in receipts and then they got reimbursed, which some programs are. They also didn't have to prove that they needed, as I said. You know, I think many will be familiar, but we were talking about this earlier. Just last month in Tennessee, there's a program for underrepresented business support program for underrepresented businesses in the U.S. And in Tennessee, a federal judge in July struck the provision from that program that race was a factor in social determinant and in the need for programming around that. And just the end of August, now if you are Native American, Hispanic, Black, you actually have to write an essay to explain why you need funding out of that program and that provision. And I mean, that's very scary. It's scary to me, running the organization that I do. And I know that's in the US, but even if that type of thinking doesn't come to Canada, the export market is a huge market for entrepreneurs. And if that market is not available and that thinking starts to take over, we're going backwards. I still think that there is really a need just for a grant program. We are working with a lot of banks on finding ways to provide financing, but right now it's just about reducing debt so that entrepreneurs can actually go find financing somewhere else. When the COVID supports came out, a lot of those supports required that you had an existing relationship with a bank. And Indigenous entrepreneurs, only about 30% of them had an existing relationship with the bank. They really rely on personal savings, on family savings. So in the same vein, we really had to work with the banks and with the government to remove that requirement. And that is really a relationship that, when you think about the number of branches that are actually within a 100-kilometer radius of a First Nation, it is very, 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 very small. So Indigenous entrepreneurs just don't have that relationship with the bank. They don't just walk into a branch and know the teller and had that experience. So we really need to work on that, making those connections as well.
Well, and it's, I'm so glad you raised that, because one of the things I am proudest about in terms of WEKH was the work that we did in identifying some of the systemic barriers. For example, a lot of programs historically were designed for companies that were incorporated and had employees. 90% of women entrepreneurs are not incorporated. Very large percentage of Indigenous businesses are not incorporated. And that very small thing, which was a taken for granted requirement, posed a huge barrier that many people weren't aware of. So I think, rethinking, reframing, reconsidering becomes very important. And we do live in a very weird place, frankly, where some of the people most in need of financing are the ones that are being charged 10% because they're considered to be higher risk. And frankly, a lot of big businesses that don't need so much help are getting zero interest loans. So, I think, Vicki, you've done a lot to sort of challenge the assumptions and identify some of the systemic barriers and new ways of thinking about things. What are some of the promising opportunities you see on the horizon for eroding barriers to financing, but even more importantly, thinking about risk and reward in different ways?
Yeah, I wish I had a really long list, but I don't. There are, so crowdfunding, maybe I'll just go to that, because most of the people who are writing checks and doing investments are men. And in crowdfunding, it's 50-50 or even a little bit higher. And so that was one of the design points that we paid attention to when we were looking at our model. And so this idea of we're so disconnected from the end result of what a business does right now. Does anyone really have a relationship with Unilever when they buy their yogurt? Not so much, right? But when we buy local and you get to know the entrepreneurs and you go to your farmer's market and you start to have that connection, then those values are make a better economy from my perspective. And with the globalization of everything, we're just so far removed from the end impact of those things. So in crowdfunding, it's a chance to that's a great idea, that person's dream. I'm going to support that, and it's supporting them in advance to be able to produce that product. So crowdfunding, for me, feels like a real answer. It's the kinds of things that come out of crowdfunding campaigns are generally really beautiful dreams that make people more connected. Crazy, creative ideas. I'm looking at you, Alana, because Alana Ben-Ari is here from 21 Toys, and you crowdfunded your business to get it going, and people loved what you were doing, and then it gave you the money to be able to create your product. And so I think that kind of stuff is really great. I mean, I have been chipping away painfully at a lot of these systemic barriers for decades and writing op-eds about it, and I don't see it getting much better. The rules for who is investable are created by not us. And so the investment committee will say, hey, we've got this thing and we're going to start funding women entrepreneurs, but they don't change any of the rules. And so you go in there and they're like, well, you're in the retail sector. That's high risk. And I'm like, says who? How is tech not high risk and retail is high risk? What? Who made up those rules? But these are the kinds of things that exist in banks in particular, and they need to get changed. And we have the data to show that that doesn't make sense. but they're legacy rules that stay there and then make it really hard to create change. You and I bitch about this all the time. And try, like, how do we do that? What could we do? Could we do an op-ed and get 2,400 people to sign and say, like, we're trying all the time to hack the system to try and, match for the results that we have, but it's tough.
I think the other piece is data, right? We don't have good data. We have lots of really good marketing campaigns by banks on their programs, but we don't actually have the kind of insights that they have, for example, in the UK on who gets the money and what the terms are. So I do think, not that banks are not my best friend, but I do think there are opportunities to improve that transparency. Tabitha, do you want to talk a bit about supplier diversity? WEKH here. The newly named former CCLGC is also here, but they have a new name. And some of your other partners who work on supplier diversity. You want to talk about that?
About 5 years ago, we launched what is called Supply Change, and it was really about getting Indigenous businesses into the supply chains of corporate Canada. And at the same time, launched a lot of work to advocate with the federal government for them also to set a minimum target of 5% to purchase from Indigenous businesses. And we do see corporate Canada really coming on board. I mean, at that time, in 2018, Suncor, Imperial Oil were purchasing and had commitments to purchase from Indigenous businesses, partially because they had impact benefit agreements with the communities in the Fort McMurray area. But in 2020, Suncor had set a target of 5%. They had exceeded that target, and they spent $900 million with Indigenous businesses in the area. And at the time when I first joined CCAB, it was fall of 2018, and we went to the Hill, met with a number of ministers, and Mark, who was the COO at Suncor, came with us. And he was so great to have in those meetings, because we were in meetings where people were still saying, but isn't it higher risk? And doesn't it cost more to purchase from Indigenous business? And he would say, no, they're working like in a very high risk environment, and I have no concern about them being higher risk. And if they do come in at a higher cost, because we have a mandate to meet a target of 5%, we can sit down and have a conversation to say, hey, this is where we actually need you to come in, so that we can just bring entrepreneurs in the door. We have a board member on our board, a young guy who owns an electrician company, and he tells the story about start at a light bulb. So he kept calling Suncor, trying to get in to do work in the plant, and eventually said, can I just come change the light bulbs? And that's what he did. He went in, like, just with his service to change the light bulbs, started to build a relationship with the buyers, with procurement, build the trust, and now he has large projects at Suncor, both in Fort McMurray and down in Calgary. But it was about how he was able to just get into the door of that corporation. And that is a barrier. Same to the network and the people that you know. How, as a small entrepreneur, do you find the person in purchasing in Scotiabank that's going to put you as a priority? So through the supply chain program, corporations have to identify that person within their organization that can connect directly, and an Indigenous entrepreneur knows that's the person that I can call. So we've had a number of corporations who have made a commitment of 5%. Oftentimes, when they start looking at who they're purchasing from, they already are purchasing from Indigenous businesses and just didn't know that. And part of that is because in the past, Indigenous businesses didn't want to self-identify because people would have thought they were risky. But we've had lots of interesting organizations come on, and part of it is to have that conversation. You know, you meet with a business. So we met with MLSE, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, and they were like, well, what would we buy from an Indigenous business?
Everything.
Like, you know, what? Yeah. And we said, there's food and beverage, there's contracting, so they've actually brought in a Indigenous coffee company to 11, Birch Bark Coffee. They've had some conversations with a brewery here in the city, and in speaking to her, she said, when I got that call from MLSE saying, can you please send some samples for us to maybe have in our spaces, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, she was in tears. She said, like, just that one call to think my beer might be in real sports is an incredible move for her. And to go back to MLSE and tell them that story, it was like, it meant a lot to the purchasers at MLSE also. So that's really progressing, you know, of course, not as fast as everybody would like it to, but we're really seeing some progress there. And with the federal government, we were really pleased. I was very honored to be able to be with Minister Anand, who was the procurement minister at the time, when they announced a minimum requirement of 5%. And we've been working really closely with departments across the government on how that we can help them get to that 5%. And we're having some real success, particularly with Ministry of Defense, who is really doing a lot of good work on looking for businesses, ensuring that they have the security clearances that they need, so when big purchases come up, they're ready. If we can get the federal government to purchase 5% of their spend from Indigenous businesses, that's $1 billion a year into the Indigenous economy. And that money is going to make a huge difference, not just from that entrepreneur, but for a social perspective, from a health perspective, from a nursing center or an elder center in a community. It goes much further than that one business.
I think it's so important, and the only thing that I think is worth adding is that sometimes large organizations and indeed government need to rethink their processes. It's sort of similar to the rules around banking. It's one thing if you've got $1 billion bridge and the risk management that goes with that and the due diligence and so on. If it's a $100,000 contract, do you really need a 150-page RFP to submission to do public relations for a department? So I think, Procurement Assistance Canada and some of the work that's going on there is kind of impressive, because they're really starting to question the basic assumptions they have built into a lot of the buying processes. But Nadine, what's important for the Black community in terms of not just building entrepreneurship, but intergenerational wealth?
Well, having the opportunities like everybody else to participate in an economy that others do, that we don't have that same option. I think when I hear about the 5%, I think it's such a wonderful opportunity, because the opportunity is that entrepreneurs participating with that opportunity gets to formalize their business better. They get to understand how to level up their business. They get to implement and adapt the skills that's needed. And what happens is that your workforce sees that, and they also level up and benefit. And then when I think about families, you talk about your daughter watching you. Like, my daughter's in New York now, bossing it at Shopify. So I'm here taking care of the grandkids today. So that's the other challenge, is that as women, we have to juggle so many things. But I think those opportunities are critical, because as others see, we can mentor others and we can guide others as well, but we have the opportunity to make our businesses better when we have these opportunities. And especially for Black businesses we have been left out of this economy, very much so. We still have a lot of work to do, but there's a great opportunity in partnership when we see other businesses doing it. Then we too, in the spirit of see it and be it, there's that as well.
Yeah, I have to put in a pitch for the See It, Be It program. I think people know about it, but one of the things we did, because if you say name 3 entrepreneurs, most people will go Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, or some combination. I can't tell them apart of those tech guys, right? And so the See It, Be It campaign was really simple. It was just profile award-winning diverse women across sectors. And we started with 1,000, now we've got 2,000. And the stories are unbelievable, but we have to share that information. And Dean Holmes, I will say, I was horrified to realize that most of the textbooks that we use in our entrepreneurship program right here in TRSM are all those guys. We don't have stories of successful women. We don't have stories of diverse entrepreneurs. And so one of the things we're doing is trying to correct that, because if you can't see it, you can't be it. So the last word goes to you, Kyla. Can you tell us, from your perspective, having listened to the others on the panel who are, in the trenches trying to build a more inclusive innovation ecosystem, what worked for you? What helped you? And what more would you like to see to really build young entrepreneurs' businesses?
Yeah, there's definitely several things. I think one of the things that was not mentioned was access to growth capital, venture capital. If you look at any of the major companies in this whole entire world, they've all got venture capital funding. And I think that's something that's very, very necessary for businesses who might not have those natural connections to individuals with money or friends and family money. Something that has helped me is I'm a Coreless venture, so I definitely got funding after a couple years of having my business, and that really put me on the next level. And then my company went on to raise venture capital funding. So I think as of 2 years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, there's been less than 200 Black women ever that have raised over $1 million, which is awful statistic. And this is in North America. And I don't know how many of those are actually in Canada. Something like 190 of them were actually American. So we went on and raised $1 million, or a little over $1 million in venture capital funding. And that actually really helped me get my business to the next level. And it helped us expand, helped us be able to get the connections that I know that we needed. However, it's something that I don't see is happening enough. It's an unequal playing field when you prove your business out and then you don't have money to then take it on to the next level. So I think that's something that really definitely needs to happen. And I raised my venture capital funding from U.S. investors. So I definitely think there needs to be a lot more focus on venture capital funding for smaller businesses, not just that growth capital, but that pre-seed capital, because honestly, that's just getting a seat at the table. So I would really like to see that more for younger entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs of color, entrepreneurs for diverse backgrounds, because I think that's really one of the key ways that we make change. Nadine mentioned that, businesses from diverse backgrounds hire other people who look like them, hire people from their communities, and I think that would be an awesome way to be able to really make long-lasting change, because without the capital, it's not sustainable. So, yeah.
Very interesting that you would raise that, because of course one of the most recently announced programs is an effort to create more inclusion in the VC space. Minister, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you had a final comment that you would like to make before we wrap up, I would turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. This has just been such a fruitful discussion. I'm really here to listen for the key opportunities. I am new to the role, so I'm just absorbing and taking it all in. And to those of you who are listening, I hope that you've been able to pull what I consider to be really good golden nuggets. And so I actually want to thank all the panelists for sharing it. It's been very insightful for me, especially being new to my role. So thank you all for joining, and thank you for the panelists for sharing your insights. It's truly wonderful.
And thank you all for joining us.